What's up, everybody? I'm John Middlekauff. You know what I need you to do. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We got content for days reacting to every NFL game all the time, every single day. Subscribe, like the videos. Let's go. Welcome to another episode of Three for the Money. Okay, back at it again with my main man, Stuckey from the Action Network. I was just watching him on YouTube with a little Sunday six-pack. Seeing some of his favorite bets this week. We actually agree on one. All lines today presented by DraftKings. It is week 5 in the National Football League. It's week 6, technically, in college football. So we're off and running. You know, sometimes when I say that out loud, I start to get like the Sunday scaries. I'm like, we're moving too fast. Like, we're getting too close to the end. I mean, it just flies by. Stuckey. Let's give a hat tip to you, the Baltimore Ravens, who you absolutely loved them in that spot, and they brought. I mean, the game was over relatively well, definitely after the trick play failed for Joe Brady. And let's give a hat tip to myself for my guy Kalen DeBoer that 3 out of the last 4 games against Dan Lanning, Steve Sarkisian, and now Kirby Smart. I know the game was close, but give me a fucking break. They worked them. How about that? How about them apples?
Yeah, well, Ravens, that trick play, I could tell you there's been over the past 5 seasons as a Ravens fan, there's been a lot of blown leads, blown double-digit leads.
Momentum
And
was shifting too, huh?
yeah, you could feel it in the stadium. And there just that play felt like it was just okay, you could exhale. So yeah, that was a classic hardball spot. There's like one a season, and he usually comes through. So that was nice. But yeah, good call on DeBoer. I thought that look, the Alabama secondary still has issues. I mean, Beck ended up throwing for like 500 yards. But and look, I got to credit Georgia to at least, I mean, how many teams can go down 28-0 with 4 turnovers, a safety? And granted, they good to go 5 for 5 and 4 downs, and then still somehow take the lead. But I thought the difference was you were right, and I was shocked that Georgia came out with like a deer in the headlights look. This is a team that's played big games, but Carson Beck looked like he was seeing ghosts early. Did they not expect Milroe to use his legs on the edge? They had 2 weeks to prepare for this, and I thought the difference in the game was ultimately that Alabama was able to build that big lead. Why? Because they had the better game plan, and I also thought that they came out, more focused, more well prepared, and obviously it
We have
helps when
evidence
you're at
now.
home.
We have evidence now, Stuckey, right? The Pac-12 championship game, which I would say leans Oregon in Vegas in terms of home crowd. He came out guns blazing, controlled the game. Sark, same thing, came out right away. I think they might have like the score was like 7-7 or 4, but you could tell like DeBoer was in control of that game. Same thing here. Obviously,
Yep.
Michigan. I think we all agree the teams. It wasn't a fair fight. I mean, Michigan was just clearly better than them. So no, you'd have to have the greatest game plan in the history of the world even to keep the thing close. But if you remove that game, 3 or 4 games now, or the other 3 games where they had, I would say close to equal teams, right? You would say Alabama and Georgia are equal, Sark, Washington, and Washington, Oregon. DuBoer's advantage, like I'm a fan, but it's mind blowing how fucking good the guy is.
Yeah, especially against all of who's considered top tier coaches in college football. He's got the best of them. Uh, almost, I mean, Harbaugh's no longer there, so I mean, every time so far in all of their matchups. So
And his
yeah, I
OC's
thought,
coaching Gino, throwing up 600 yards now.
yep, yeah, Gino looks spectacular, but yeah, I thought that was the difference in the game. Georgia, the turnovers bit them. Coming back, they did make Kirby made some good adjustments as you would imagine. They started taking away the edge for Milroe to run, and Beck kind of cleared his mind. But you're you're just not going to beat Alabama if you come out like that. And the difference was coaching, I think, and the game plan was just better. So yeah, good call there. The Bills. The funny thing about the the Bills game is going into last week, everyone and their mother said the Bills are the best team in the NFL. Josh Allen's winning the MVP. Bills are unstoppable. And that's what happens when you play, you know, three clown cars. They played the Jags, who are still winless, the Dolphins, who are they're the first team since the winless Browns to not hold a lead through 4 games. Yes, they have a win, but they won on the final play. And who else did they play? The Cardinals. So and then what happens? One game in a classic Harbaugh spot. Before last weekend, the Ravens have all kinds of issues, right? The pass defense, they can't hold on to a lead. The special teams. Now the Ravens are the best team in the NFL. That's all I hear. It's one game, so the overreactions are crazy. And a lot of times, if you just simply, it's uncomfortable a lot. But if you just, because who wanted to fade Buffalo last week as an underdog? But if you just kind of, it's very simple, high level. You just kind of fade those overreactions. You just buy low and sell high. That's just your general principle when betting the NFL. You're doing better than most. I mean, like this week, where is it scary? Washington Commanders, unstoppable offense. We cannot be stopped. By the way,
Everyone's going to bet on that. And who wants to bet on Deshaun Watson, the Cleveland Browns, right?
Yeah, but now the line is, they're 3.5 point favorites at home. That's a big difference for one of the worst defenses in the NFL. This is a team that, 3 weeks ago was a 1 point favorite at home against the Giants. So, and the Giants probably win that game if they had a kicker on the roster. So,
I mean, what's the preseason look-ahead line at this game? Probably Washington +2 or 3.
Yeah, probably +3.5. Now we have learned that Daniels is a lot. I mean, I thought he was probably going to be like a Justin Fields and he's still. Well, Fields is playing well, but maybe he will not end up being what he looks like. But you can't discount what he's done, so you have to upgrade Washington significantly. But this is a big jump, and you have to remember that Daniels, he's been in very fortunate situations the past 3 weeks. I mean, they played the Giants, one of the worst defenses in the NFL, especially their secondary. They played the Bengals, whose defense is a mess right now. They have their entire defensive line has been out, so they were able to just run it, and then easy passes. And then you play the Cardinals. I mean, the Cardinals, you could argue they have the worst defense in the NFL. So the Browns defense is an upper echelon unit, and they're more aggressive. Like, they're going to play a ton of cover one. They're going to be so the defenses that they played were more passive, and you're able to run that horizontal stuff. We have heard this with Cliff Kingsbury before. The offense is unstoppable. Kyler's unstoppable. Arizona used to always get out to these.
But it doesn't slow down till November or December.
That's true. Call of Duty comes out, I think, October 25th for Kyler. So yeah, you just have to hold your horses. I mean, Daniels, he looks. The thing I like about Daniels so far, I mean, obviously his stats speak for themselves. You have to take into account the level of competition, but he just does look extremely poised and comfortable in the pocket, which is really what you want to see from a rookie quarterback, especially this early in the season. So I have to give them credit. Like, that's probably one. Now, look, Washington could blow out Cleveland. Cleveland is not a good football team right now. They have all kinds of injuries on the offensive line, although their center did practice today, which is big because their backup center was really bad last week. And even though he got jobbed on a holding call, that probably cost them the game against the Raiders. But the other ones, like, the Vikings, is probably the top of the market on the Vikings. And you just saw the Jets. They can't move the ball against the Broncos. They lose at home to the Broncos, who have 60 yards passing, the fewest yards passing in 15 years for a winning team. Who wants to bet the Jets right now? How is Aaron Rodgers going to handle the blitz? But now you're talking about the Vikings, a team that was projected to win 6-ish games, a 3-point favorite over the Jets on a neutral field. Probably getting a little too rich. Just saw the Ravens. Now everyone loves the Ravens out. Getting out to a field goal favorite on the road in Cincy. I know Cincy has injuries on the defensive line. We'll see if they get healthier. They could this week, so it's going to be tough to stop that Ravens rushing attack. But now we're saying the Ravens are a field goal plus home field advantage better than the Bengals. Not sure about that. So those are some of the, I think, weekly overreactions in the market that I'll be looking to bet against.
Okay, let's start there, because one thing you've taught me, and now I look for this, is as the season goes on, home dogs in divisional games. And that game to me jumped out to me. Obviously, Cincinnati Their offense has played much better the last couple weeks. Defensively, they've been missing a lot of players. And like you said, I mean, really, you can't argue the two first halves for the Ravens the last 2 weeks are as good as any team's played so far this year. Like it's dominant completion. Them and I mean Minnesota's also had some incredible first halves. Like that's a super high level. Now, divisional games though, this team's very comfortable with the opponent. I mean, it's not like we have new coaching staff. Zach Taylor's been there for this, era of the Ravens personnel, so they're very, very comfortable. Everyone is going all in on Baltimore, which I don't disagree with the way they've played. But these divisional games, we know they get weird. Joe Burrow is looking more healthy. The other thing that's jumping out is, those first couple weeks, Jamar Chase was kind of MIA. He started to make some big plays. Obviously, had 2 touchdowns on the Monday night. He had that sweet ass touchdown last week where he like spun around guys, break tackles, run around. It's like, okay, you're getting that. Like that's what makes them pretty potent. Because to me, Higgins has always felt kind of like a stiff, tall guy, but he is productive. But it's like I defend Mike Brown. Like, yeah, I'm not giving that guy 100 million. Like, I should be able to find it. But what Jamar Chase brings to the table, like, holy shit. Can you imagine if that's always the thing, like with the Ravens, if they ever got a guy like that, like, holy moly, they would really be potent. But I'm hammering the Bengals plus 2.5. Now, the defense situation makes me nervous, but this kind of feels like one of those where the Ravens kind of got their mojo back, feeling themselves a little bit. Divisional game, always big, but this feels like a Super Bowl for Cincinnati. Like if they're going to get back in this season, it's must win. You can't be 1-4, especially if Baltimore beats you and assuming Pittsburgh wins at night. Like you're fucked, aren't you?
Yeah, it's a massive game for the division. If the Ravens win, they're probably going to win the division. If the Bengals win, this race is going to be tight. With the Steelers in the mix as well. I mean,
I guess the Ravens are 2-2, right?
Yeah. So I mean, Ravens go to 3-2, and then you drop to 1-4, and you lost your home game to Baltimore, and you had a last place schedule. The Bengals had a last place schedule. That was one of their edges coming into the season. They already lost their AFC East advantage, which was big because the Ravens beat the Bills and the Bengals lost at home to the Patriots.
Yeah.
So it's bad. That's supposed to be, a potential full game, maybe a full game that you would get on the Ravens. So this is a huge game at home. I agree. You look like there's the Bengals defensive line. It's definitely scary. I mean, even the Panthers could run on them last week. The Panthers can't run on anybody because they just don't have any guys. So we'll see if they can get Rankins and Hill back. It looks like Henderson's going to play. Jackson and Murphy, who have been, they were supposed to be contributors. They just had their practice windows open up. They were full participants. We'll see if they play on the defensive line. So they could have some reinforcements coming along that defensive line, which would be so important because it's really hard to see, if they trot out the same defensive line that they have the past 2 weeks. I mean, Washington could just run at will on them. Like it was just 4 to 5 yards a pop. Carolina did the same thing. It's a team that hasn't ran the ball well in 2 years. So we'll see if they can get some reinforcements back on the defensive line. I would imagine they get one back, which would really help. But I think this is more about the Bengals offense that they can keep up here. The way to beat this Ravens defense, the run defense is really good. You have to attack them on the outside with good receivers. Like the Bills just don't have that. Humphrey and Stevens can lock down the Bills receivers who aren't, going to really overwhelm you. And I think that the Bengals are one of those teams that can do that. And Burrow's playing really well. We always see him get off to these slow starts over the first couple weeks. A lot of times he's dealing with injury or rust from the preseason, and then he starts to get going. And now he's cooking, and he's got all his pieces back. And I mean, this kid Eric All, this receiver, he looks really good. This tight end, he looks really good as well. So I think they can keep up. And could the Ravens win? Yeah, obviously. But I think this is a good time to sell them at the peak of their market, especially if you can get a field goal. Like it's like flirting going there. But this sets up. I see value in the Bengals, and this sets up to be like last team with the ball wins. And especially if the Bengals can get some guys back on the defensive line, that will really help. But yeah, home divisional dog, a lot of familiarity here. Ravens off that huge win against Buffalo. This is this is the time to buy the Bengals. I agree with you here.
I feel dirty betting on this game, but honestly, it might be my favorite bet on the board. New England actually had a couple moments against the Niners early on where there was a little fight. Then they just got overwhelmed, the talent discrepancy. I don't really think it's debatable. The Dolphins version minus Tua is the worst team in the NFL. Like I've watched basically every Jag snap. Obviously they're going to end up with like 5 wins or 4 wins probably, but they are dramatically better. Like this version, if they play the Dolphins 10 times, I'm taking the Jags 7 or 8. Tyler Huntley version. I mean, this team, the stats for them obviously jump out the fucking screen. Offensively, what does Tyreek have? Like 87 total yards since Tua was laying on the ground. It's been a complete disaster. They kind of have, I mean, everyone's making fun of the Titans, and the Titans were kicking their ass. I mean, that was a beatdown. So, in fairness to McDaniel, who, listen, I think's pretty overrated. Everyone's like obsessed with his look. I mean, he hasn't won a big game in 2 years. They fucking crumble down the stretch. But I don't know what you're supposed like. Is Bill Walsh winning games with Tyler Huntley? Like, I probably not. I do think New England, this is a pretty interesting spot. If you are going to bet on them throughout the season, I think Miami everyone's talking about Jacksonville tapping out, and maybe they do. I thought they played pretty hard last week. I think Miami's got 1, 2, 3 Cancun written all over them in October.
Yeah, look, it's been a good run on the show for 3 years. But this is probably the end of the road for me. I mean, you're gonna pull me in on a Thursday afternoon to talk about this game. I think this is my last appearance on the show.
This
No,
is
joking.
sick. But this is why we
game,
gamble, though.
first of all, I have no idea who's playing this game. If you want to go, you want like if you're a fan of CBS receipts, go look at the injury report for both teams. I don't know who's playing on the Patriots offensive line. They just lost their star center. Everyone else is hurt. Both their starting safeties, Duggar and Peppers, they didn't practice today. They might be out. One of their starting corners might be out. Does it even matter against Miami?
Well, Jalen Phillips is out for the year, right?
Miami lost Phillips. They have offensive line injuries that they don't have a quarterback. I mean, your hope is that like Huntley is better with the timing, but it like with the offense after a game, and he can like just throw it deep and it hits Hill 1 or 2 times. I mean, what is this? This total is at let's see.
I'm gonna guess
This
33.
total's at 30. Nah, it's at 36. It might go lower. Perfect weather. This is such a low total for but it might go lower. I mean, to get a total of 35 or below with perfect weather is extremely rare. I have no idea on this game. I guess if you're New England looks like they're still trying. Brissett doesn't make mistakes generally. I mean, he's one of the lowest interception rates in NFL history, which why it makes him such a good backup. Also, is this a game like you try some Drake May? I don't know. There's a ton of uncertainty, but in this spot, Miami looks like they have quit. I mean, I don't know what's going on with McDaniel. He's making some bizarre decisions, and you see all these other. I know it's tough. You lose you lose Tua, you lose all these guys, but look at these other coaches that are well respected in the league. They're winning with backup quarterbacks. Look at LaFleur. He's 2-0 with Malik Willis this year.
And in fairness to Miami, the Titans defense is pretty good. Like if you just took their defense and like gave it to the Bills, I think we'd go, are they the favorite to win the Super Bowl? I mean, how good did the kid from Texas sweat? He's 350 pounds making tackles. Their DBs are good. Like I like the Titans kind of on defense. Obviously, offensively, you're rolling with Levis and Mason Rudolph, but the Titans, pretty respectable opponent, I thought, through 4 weeks.
Yeah, I agree. Sadly, I bet them each of the first 3 weeks.
Same.
Some horrible losses, but I didn't bet them against Miami. I should have, but that's how I knew they were going to cover because I finally didn't bet them. But yeah, I like their defense. Jeffrey Simmons, one of the best defensive linemen in the NFL. He didn't even play. Him and Sweat, formidable. More than formidable duo in the interior. So, yeah, if I was going to bet this, I mean, it's like Miami on a short week with all those injuries. I just don't know what's going to play for them. If I had to bet it, and I had to watch this game, you'd like tie me to a chair, and I would bet the Patriots. So I do agree with you. And, yeah, I do think the Jags are still fighting. look, last week, that was another example. Who of the talked about it last week that I like the Jags against the Texans. Who wanted to bet the Jags? But for some reason, the Texans haven't looked great. They got blown out. The Jags also got blown out. Everyone saw it. And then the line went up to 7. Who wanted to bet the Jags after getting blown out by the Bills? They haven't won a game. But I mean, you mentioned Jags versus Dolphins. The Jags should have beat the Dolphins in week 1. They
Oh,
fumbled
yeah,
going
they
into
were
the
up
end zone.
17-3.
Yeah, they fumbled. ETN fumbles in the end zone to go up 17, put the game away. Then an 80-yard touchdown the other way. So, but by the way, in that game, the Jags, as SVP says, the pitchy woo-woo, they were throwing the ball back towards the end zone. Almost had a heart attack. Luckily, it was ETN. They ruled forward progress at the 1. One of those is going to happen again soon. I've had a couple in the past. They are ruin your day. But yeah, Jags are still fighting. That was just another example of, okay, market is just overselling how bad this Jaguars team is. Divisional game, familiarity, and they were able to cover pretty comfortably. Houston came back to get that win with a touchdown in the final minute. But back to your original question, yeah, it's Patriots or nothing. But I have no idea who's even playing in this game.
Before we get into, I would say, the two marquee games, I know you're fired up on one. I think we got some agreement here. The Bears, I know they're 2-2, but they just do not pass the smell test to me. I mean, especially given all the hype and what everyone thought. They finally won a game. Obviously, the run game and Sweat, was a big addition in terms of them not being able to run the ball through 3 weeks. But they kind of just had their quarterback dink and dunk. They said that hero ball shit because you're way off. I mean, when he throws the ball down the field, I heard someone say yesterday his metrics down the field are pretty poor so far. And the eye test is there were a couple passes in that game against the Rams where DJ Moore streaking down the sideline, and it's not even close. And listen, I'm not bailing on Caleb Williams, but he's clearly just off for the hype and what we saw in college. But the Panthers, since going to the bullpen and going with Andy Dalton, they scored 37 against the Raiders. They scored 24. Like their offense is just pretty solid now. And it's not like the Bears are scoring 30 points. So I get 4 points on the road against a Bears team that, I'm sorry, looks much more like a 6 or 7 win team than a 9 or 10 win team. I think that's an auto hammer, no?
Yeah, I like the Panthers here. This is the Panthers team that I was
Bet on
trying
early
to sell you.
Are the Bears good?
No, I don't think so. I mean, their defense is playing well. They were able to run it a bit on the Rams last week. Maybe that happens again. But even in that game against the Rams, they were pretty fortunate. The Rams couldn't score in the red zone. The Bears scored off a couple turnovers. They were outgained, outplayed on a down-to-down basis. It was a pretty fortunate win. Who are their 2 wins against this year? The Titans. It was a 1 in a million win at home. I had a punt block for a touchdown. Will Levis threw him a pick 6 for a touchdown. They came back from down 17-0 despite not scoring an offensive touchdown, and then they beat the Rams practice squad. I mean, who was playing for the Rams in that game? Both pretty lucky wins.
And that game was close against the Rams.
Yeah, very close. Could have went either way. So yeah, I mean, Caleb Williams he's not there yet. He leads the NFL by a wide margin in off-target throw percentage. So you're right, like just anything downfield is not there. So credit to them. They made some adjustments.
What's your take on that? Why do you think that's happening? Because it's not just missing the guys on their fingertips. He's fucking airmailing Kevin Garnett, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's part of it's the offensive line. So the offensive line has not been good, and it's definitely going to continue to be a struggle. So I don't know if he
played with a bad offensive line last year.
Yeah, it's true. I don't know if he's like just struggling to deal with, hey, play within the structure of the offense. I don't think the play calling has been great either. That hasn't helped him. And then like at USC, he had just like a longer leash and he just felt more comfortable. And so I really don't know what the issue. It's still early, but you just have to go off what you're seeing. And right now, it's definitely problematic. So this is an offense that. Yeah, it's not a team or an offense that I want to back to win by margin. By, you're laying 4, you got to basically win by 6, 7 or more. It's not an offense that's there right now. Now the Panthers D is horrendous. They had more injuries. They lost their linebacker Shaq Thompson. They already lost Derek Brown. But what they're doing, they're just taking away the explosive play. They're going to play a ton of cover 3, but they're blitzing a lot because they have no other way of generating pressure, like none. So Evero's blitzing a lot. That's something the Bears have not shown any ability to handle. I mean, their offensive line is just in disarray when dealing with any blitzes or stunts. So the Panthers could have some success there, and then Evero will give some complex cover 3 looks on the back end. So maybe it forces Caleb into a mistake. But you brought up the key point here with the Panthers is that, I mean, their offense has scored 60 points in 2 games with Dalton. They scored 60 points in 8 games over their last 8 games with Bryce Young combined. So this is just a much improved unit. The offensive line also significantly improved. You look at pressure rate on just dropbacks allowed. Panthers #1 in the NFL by a wide margin. I think they're at like 15%. Next best team's at like 21%. So their offensive line is playing really well, giving Dalton time. And Dalton is more than capable of making throws. So I think that the offensive line can handle the Bears' defensive front. So yeah, I think that it's Panthers or nothing here against the Bears, who are just their offense right now. Maybe Caleb will get there and they'll start to figure some more things out. But right now, it's not a team that I'm running to bet as a favorite of more than a field goal.
Okay, obviously the 2 big games this weekend. The Bills-Texans, it's kind of a stay away for me. I want to lean Bills, but you watch them against the Ravens and you go, God, their defense at any moment. And we know how potent Houston is. But then again, you watch Houston against the Jags, you're like, this is not the team that I hammered to be the #1 overall seed. Nico Collins has been incredible. I don't necessarily have a strong opinion on that. I do think the night game, you just look at it and you go, Lawrence is out, Micah Parsons is out. Their defense was already shitty. I mean, and did I read that Cooks is injured as well?
Yeah, he's got an infection. He's out.
So you go, why don't I empty my account on the Pittsburgh Steelers? And then you go, well, I've been gambling long enough to know in these spots, it almost feels too good to be true. But I listen, I don't know how it's hard. If you did, you're basically just fading everybody, betting the Cowboys, but you can't feel confident on it. I mean, if Pittsburgh wins, all of a sudden you're 4-1. You start feeling yourself a little bit, and Fields definitely has looked better this year in the second half last week. I know the Colts defense isn't great, but fuck, he was making some plays. That just feels too easy to me. But I don't know how you take the Cowboys in this spot.
Yeah, well, you'd be surprised how public the Cowboys are. I mean, I was
That's true. They're like the Yankees or the Lakers or something, huh?
Yeah, I was texting with a couple of bookmakers. They're like 60-40 Cowboys to Steelers so far. So I think that they'll actually end up getting more as far as just ticket.
Why do you think that is? Just because they're just the most public team going by a mile?
Yeah, they're a public team. It's like Dak and Lamb. People still don't trust Fields. Cowboys are just a sexier team. People like to bet in prime time. But look, I mean, but public sides, I mean, last year they had a really good year. Sometimes they win. Look, go back to the Chiefs Falcons game on Sunday night. Lions against Seahawks. That was a big one Monday night. I like the Steelers here. I mean, you can't underestimate what the losses of Lawrence and especially Parsons means to that defense. Now look at the defense. What is it? It's a bottom of the barrel unit. I mean, Parsons does so much for that. Those are their 2 best defensive linemen, not only as far as pass rush is concerned, but also against the run. Their run D is non-existent. You look at the teams that can run the ball that played Dallas this year, and the Saints just destroyed them. The Ravens did whatever they wanted on the ground. They have nothing. And on the back end, they don't have their secondary is a mess. Yep. Because you had an injury to Deron Bland. You just have Diggs, who, it's kind of a boom or bust corner and not much else. Lewis is decent in the slot, but you don't really have a second corner that you can rely upon. But what does Pittsburgh want to do? They want to run the ball. They want to run the ball some more, and then take their shots with Pickens, get their tight end involved a little bit, and then Fields is playing really well. It looks like he has a good command on this offense.
He
He's
does.
using his legs effectively to extend drives. Yeah, they're playing well, but they want to run, run, run. They want to run up the middle. You know, who's the worst defense in the NFL defending runs up the middle? Well, the Dallas Cowboys. So they should be able to move the ball. And the other side of the ball, when Dallas has it, by the way, this is a really good field goal if you're into kicking. Really good kicking matchup. Brandon Aubrey obviously is a weapon, but the Steelers have a weapon of their own. It doesn't get talked about enough. It's the most accurate kicker in NFL history now because of Tucker's
Well,
struggles of late.
I mentioned on the podcast like last week. When did they play? Oh, on Thursday night, and Aubrey he's banging 60-yard field goals. And then you look up the story. I'm like, I'm just overreacted. Best kicker. And I had a bunch of people like, that's bullshit. Just check out his numbers. It's like, yeah, I get it. He's fucking, we're not ranking kickers here. These aren't quarterbacks. But you're right. I mean, this Aubrey's story is pretty incredible to be a soccer player, to then go, just start training, go to the minor leagues, and then become what he's become. I mean, that's a freaking awesome sports story, is it not?
Yeah, well, unless you bet the Cowboys last week and then he cost you the cover.
That's true. That's true.
At the end. But Boswell, that's a very tough stadium to kick in, by the way. So for the fact that he's the most accurate kicker now in NFL history,
why is that?
There's tricky winds, especially on one side of the stadium. There's like these swirling winds. So for the longest time, Justin Tucker had the stadium record for most made field goals over 50 yards. I think Boswell has since passed him, but it was a road kicker. I mean, look how many 50 yards are made. Like 50-plus yarders are not easy in that stadium, especially on one side, because there's these swirling winds that are just hard to judge, and they just come and take the ball. And so a lot of teams won't even try them. Like at 53, if it's like 53, 54, 55, especially on the left side, they just punt or go for it because it's very difficult to kick. It's probably the hardest stadium in the NFL to kick at. So yeah, good kicker matchup. But the other side of the ball, I mean, look, the Dallas offense is struggling. They can't run the ball at all. Like it's non-existent. So the offensive line is worse. You got two really good guards, but you got a couple of rookies who are struggling. Steele is just one tackle spot. And you can't run it at all. It's the worst. They're down there with, the Raiders as far as rush efficiency. They just can't run it. They don't have any backs. This was all talked about all offseason. It's not surprising. And their offensive line is taking a step back. So there's no help for Dak. And then it's just the weapons. How many times can you go to Lamb? And defenses know that. So there's so much attention put on defending CeeDee Lamb. And Dak's now in all these known passing situations, right? They're not able to run it effectively, and they're still doing it too often. They're still trying to run it too frequently on early downs, which is just not smart. And then you're in these third downs, and guess what's going to happen now? It's TJ Watt, that pass rush is going to tee off. They're probably going to cause a turnover to the Steelers play a lot of looks that Dak has struggled more against. Historically. So yeah, there's no cooks here. It's like how much damage can Lamb really do when there's just no help? And I just think the losses of Parsons and Lawrence can't be overstated. And this is a classic rah-rah Tomlin spot off a loss in a game that I thought that they were pretty unfortunate to lose against the Colts. I think they outplayed them. They had a fumble in the red zone. I think that they were the better team down to down in that game. And the Cowboys were maybe a bit fortunate against the Giants. Dable, I think, should have went for it. But they had two red zone trips that they kicked two field goals in, and they were pretty fortunate to win that game. So yeah, I like the Steelers here. It's just a classic rah-rah Tomlin spot at home, prime time. And what does that translate to? The defense coming out just with their hair on fire, probably forced to keep turnover. So yeah, I like the Steelers. Anything under 3. I played some cheap money line.
You had to get a little joy out of Flacco coming out of the pen and taking down the Steelers, throwing a couple easy touchdowns. He looked, Flacco, who would have thought? I mean, these last couple of years, pretty cool story. I mean, this guy was clearly toward the end of his career, in Baltimore when Lamar kind of Wally pips him. I guess he's not injured. He just got benched. but then the Jets and just kind of bouncing around. It's just kind of over. And then you come back last year, and then again, he just looks like the same guy we saw in Cleveland. It's fucking awesome.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Of course, Anthony Richardson's hurt too. It's a great spot for him. He's going to get to play.
Yeah, I would want to bet the Jags this week as a like 2.5 point favorite if it's Richardson starting. If it's Flacco,
I like the
don't.
Colts. I like
Um,
Colts.
I would like the Colts if Flacco is playing. Richardson is he's too erratic, he's too inaccurate right now. Um, and the Jags, their defense isn't great. They're going to play a ton of man. I think Flacco would be able to exploit that. I'm not Richardson. I don't think can. Just on a down-to-down basis, he's not accurate enough. Um, and the Colts defense, I mean, they have injuries. Jonathan Taylor's banged up. But if you got Flacco out there against that defense, I trust the Colts more. It's one of those situations where Richardson, you got to remember Richardson only played a couple games last year. He's still a rookie, but I had concerns about his accuracy coming out of college. I still do. He hasn't demonstrated the ability to consistently move an offense. He's going to have a couple highlight throws. He's got a cannon of an arm, but just no consistency, no accuracy. So I think Flacco gives them a higher floor on that offense, and he'd be able to move it. So that's something that I'm keeping an eye on. But yeah, the Flacco story is pretty amazing. Guy is ageless.
Can I get you out of here on this? Any Saturday, couple games that just jumped out to me. Michigan, an underdog on the road at Washington. I'm not sure Washington's any good. Missouri, I don't necessarily have a take on this because I don't know. I know Missouri's good, but on the road at A&M, they're getting 2.5 points. That number kind of jumped out to me, but A&M now has gone. They've transitioned to quarterbacks, right? That the backup can run around a little bit. He's a better player. Or I haven't been dialed in on A&M. Is the other starter Wegeman or whatever his name back?
Might be. That's game time decision. By the way, I forgot to touch on your Bills-Texans. Bill, I want to see if Mixon plays. Mixon or
He
Pierce. They both didn't
practiced. I
practice.
saw on Wednesday.
Yeah,
Or
did
was
was
he
not out
limited?
there today. So I don't know. They needed that. What teams are doing against Stroud, why the Texans offense is struggling a bit. He's having a bit of a sophomore slump. I think they're going to be fine. But they're my only Super Bowl future this year. I'm not too worried. But teams they just did what they did against the Chiefs and Mahomes a couple years ago. Jacked up the cover two. They tripled the rate of cover two from last year, opposing defenses to take away the explosive play, right? The Texans were the exception to the rule last year, all those explosive plays. The Texans got to figure that out. When did the Texans offense look the best this year? And what do you want to do when you're against defenses that are playing two high safeties? You want to be able to run the ball, force one of those safeties down, then you can take your shots. Well, they look great this year when Mixon was running the ball well. I mean, he ran all over the Colts. Without him, Pierce is hurt too, but they really need Mixon to get that offense going. So that's something that I'm watching. If he plays, like I kind of like Houston in that game. College, I like Washington. I think Michigan's bad. This is a team, they got lucky to beat Minnesota. They had two 10-yard touchdown drives after turnovers in that game. And Minnesota outgained them by like 60 yards. Minnesota, who got ran all over by Iowa the week before, shut down Michigan's rushing attack. They saw what they were going to do. Michigan was able to kind of surprise USC in a really good spot. They made the quarterback change to Orgy. USC didn't really know what to expect, and they were able to run on them. Minnesota, who doesn't have a good run defense, was able to shut down Michigan's rush attack. Well, Washington, I think, will be able to do the same. Steve Belichick knows it's a one-dimensional offense. I mean, Michigan's won their last two games by scores of 27-24 at home. By the way, this is their first road game traveling across the country. There's still some holdovers, that Washington team that want some national championship revenge. I'm sure they're going to be fired up. And Orgy's thrown for 30 and 60 yards in these two games, and they've won. I think it comes to an end here. I think Washington wins that game. I also like Minnesota. I at home against USC. This is a tricky spot for USC. They played
What's the line? What's the line there?
They're like catching 9. There's going to be heavy winds in that game, which favors Minnesota. Minnesota just wants to run it, control the clock, short passing attack. And their transfer quarterback's starting to get more comfortable. You saw that in the second half against Michigan. So the winds and the conditions, they're going to impact USC, who has the much more explosive passing offense. So I think Minnesota, this is your classic like running dog, catching over a touchdown. They're one of the slowest teams in college football, so they'll limit the possessions. So yeah, I like Minnesota there. I mean, USC off two, physical games. This is a team that hasn't won in the Eastern or Central time zone since 2012. I think they're 0-9, straight up 1-8 against the spread. And they got Penn State on deck. So this is just a tricky situational spot. Don't be surprised if Minnesota gets a couple calls. Big Ten blew that game last week, came out, didn't apologize. They said that they're making just changes to how they officiate. So don't be surprised if the Gophers get a couple calls. Hey, speaking of low possessions, you want to hold your nose? I bet Vandy plus 24. It's like 23 now. Still would bet it small against Bama. This Vandy team it's scary. Like Milroe could come out and they could just hit a million explosives. But this Vandy team is a team all year that I'm going to bet is a big underdog and fade anytime as a favorite. They're basically a service academy. They run like, an option-esque offense. They want to run the ball. They want to go so slow. So, they're basically treat them as a service academy. And
who's their coach?
Clark Lee. But they brought in Jerry Kill and the New Mexico State staff and Diego Pavia, who, by the way, Diego Pavia should have upset Missouri early this year as 21-point underdogs. They shortened that game. He went into Auburn last year, this staff. They shortened that. They destroyed Auburn. And then they upset Va Tech at home as 2 touchdown underdogs earlier this year. And like a service academy, they lost as double-digit favorites to Georgia State. But they're coming off a bye. Alabama, it's just human nature. That was a 60-minute emotional roller coaster. All of your eggs into that basket. Like now you're going to Vandy. Vandy's coming off of a bye. They'll have some wrinkles. Clark Lee came out. He said, they want the game to be fewer than 10 total possessions. That's what he said this week. It's hard to cover 24 if there's only 10 possessions in the game. So yeah, I like Vandy there. A&M Missouri is the hardest game for me on the board. I mean, I don't know who's going to be quarterback for A&M. I think Marcel Reed, the freshman, he's a better fit for Colin Klein's RPO offense. Wegman has not looked good, but maybe he gives them a better ceiling against the Missouri secondary, which I think is vulnerable. But so I don't know there. Missouri hasn't really played anybody. They should have lost at home to Vandy. But this is their offensive coordinator, Kirby Moore. He usually holds things back. He did this last year, and he doesn't really show much because they have really good receivers, good quarterback. And then, in one of their first big games, they'll kind of unleash the offense. So you go back and look at Missouri's results last year, like they played like Middle Tennessee State. The offense looked awful, but they just didn't show anything. So that could be, they're coming off of a bye here. This is their first road game, tough environment. But I could make a case for either team here. I'm still not sold on A&M because their secondary still has some question marks. But this is a team that probably should have lost at home to Bowling Green. They got outplayed by Arkansas in Arlington last week. They just benefited from some turnovers.
Arkansas's not bad. That running back's good.
Arkansas
they have played and they are.
I'm playing them catching 2 touchdowns against Tennessee because I'm an idiot and I'm fading Tennessee again. I'll probably lose more money doing that. But yeah, I think Arkansas is feisty. They can run the ball. My thing with Tennessee is, look, they're great, but Nico, he's not been as sharp as maybe the final scores indicate. And no one has, like, NC State has looked. So you look at who Tennessee has played. They played Little Sisters of the Poor, a couple times. And they played NC State. NC State's a bad football team. We've seen that now. This is a team that almost lost at home to La Tech. They had to come back to win against Louisiana Tech. Louisiana Tech lost at home to Tulsa. They just lost at FIU. FIU the week before lost to Monmouth. La Tech scored 10 points in that game at FIU. NC State almost lost to Western Carolina. Western Carolina has 1 win on the year by 1 possession over Elon. I mean, they got destroyed by Clemson and then destroyed by Tennessee. So NC State, last week against Northern Illinois, they won. Yes. Northern Illinois had 4 turnovers in that game. NC State had 0. And Northern Illinois still had a chance at the end of that game. NC State had 170 total yards in that game. Buffalo, the Buffalo offense, who upset Northern Illinois the week before at Northern Illinois, had more yards. So NC State is bad. They can't move the ball. They can't run it. They can't complete a forward pass. So, I can't even take that much from that Tennessee win. Then Oklahoma is a team that's I know they won at Auburn last week. They gave up 300 yards in the first half to Auburn.
They got lucky to win
They
that
got
game.
so lucky. It was a pick. I had Auburn in that game. It still hurts. But Oklahoma has they against Houston, the game's 13-10 at home in the fourth quarter. Again, they could have lost to Tulane. That game was close. Like to Oklahoma, they have all kinds of wide receiver injuries. They can't run the ball. It's like Arkansas at least can run the ball. Taylor Green, this is the problem, is that I don't really trust Taylor Green, their quarterback. He's too inaccurate, but he can run. And we saw Oklahoma start to move the ball a bit when they benched Arnold and they brought in their backup freshman who was able to run, because the Tennessee defensive line is great. So yeah, I think two touchdowns is too much. Maybe Tennessee is that good, but the data points now looking back, they don't look as good as they might have at the time.
You know what's weird about college football is like in the NFL, even when you play random teams, like you get tested in the regular season, it's hard. Look at Ole Miss. I mean, they're playing Sisters of the Poor,
Exactly.
School of the Blind, and Kentucky, who goes and plays Georgia, plays a real game, gets up for it, like kind of just gets used to playing at a high level, comes
South
in on the
Carolina,
road,
too.
and yeah. So and then they come in and kind of kick their ass. I mean, I thought Ole Miss kind of got worked in that game. And listen, everyone liked Ole Miss, but is Kentucky not bad? I mean, I don't know. Their defense is not bad. I mean, their defensive line is good.
Their defense is elite. Their defensive front is elite. They got NFL guys on the defensive line at linebacker.
And that's always the argument, right? For, people get very, very sensitive of like, the SEC so overrated. Listen, the middle of the SEC, their records might look like the middle of the Big Ten, but when you play them, you're playing 3 or 4 NFL people on defense. And when I play some of these Minnesotas or whatever, yeah, they both might end up 7-5. It's a different test physically, is it not?
Yep. Yeah.
You watch all these games. I mean,
yeah. The crazy thing is that Kentucky was down its top corner, all SEC guy in that game against Ole Miss.
That was a fantastic win. I mean, they kicked the shit out of them. I mean, physically.
It was huge. I mean, they had a great game, but they were getting their defensive line. That was the big question for me coming in the year, was the Ole Miss offensive line. You look at the transfer portal, I do think that their defense now is legit. Like Ole Miss has a good defense. They got guys who have, pedigree, results at the SEC level that they brought in. And, they have a better defensive coordinator now. It's a more well-schooled, serious defense, and they have talent. So that Ole Miss defense now is a serious, SEC contender caliber unit. But the question for me was the offensive line. That was the one unit that they didn't really, bring in top-tier talent. It was guys who, like a North Carolina transfer who struggled at North Carolina. The talent level just wasn't there. And what happened? You played Middle Tennessee, the School of the Blind. You were able to just run away with talent. But you played Kentucky. You know what Kentucky didn't do in that game? Kentucky was in the backfield the entire game. They blitzed nobody. They were dropping 7-8 every play. Take away the explosive play. That's what Stoops wants to do. Their defensive line just dominated the Ole Miss offensive line. That's probably going to be problematic when you're playing the top-tier team. So that's what I think is going to hold them back. Kentucky had a great game plan. It's similar to what they just wanted to shorten the game. Take away the explosive play, and then when they had the ball, it was just bleed the clock, keep Ole Miss on the sidelines, control the ball, and then their defensive line was the difference in the game. Their defensive front just whipped Ole Miss. I'm not sure. I'm curious to see what Ole Miss does this weekend, because you're not out of it. They still host Georgia with 1 loss. You're in the SEC.
You can get in at 9-3 if you get a big win against Georgia or Tennessee or whoever's your biggest teams on your schedule. Don't they play Texas too?
Yeah, but I would think 9-3 is a maybe, but 10-2 is still realistic. And
there's going to be a 9-3 team in the playoff, don't you think?
It's hard to say because it's going to depend on so many other things, like what happens. Like for example, this is an unlikely scenario, but if, like, for example, Michigan goes 9-3, like they're not getting it.
I agree. I'm talking more. Chance. But I'm talking more the SEC teams.
Like if it's Missouri, no, because their schedule is so easy. They don't play any of the top teams in the SEC. If it's Georgia, yes. Like Georgia plays. They just played at Bama. Georgia plays at Ole Miss and at Texas. So, if they go 9-3 and lose those 3 games, they're getting in. But like, there's other things that can happen. So
But can the ACC get two teams in? Like, could Clemson follow Miami and get in now? They look a lot better. They obviously,
yeah, I think
I guess they
Clemson's
would probably
legit.
play Miami twice, right?
Yeah, they don't play Miami, which is the
Okay,
interesting
so they
part.
could only
So
lose to them once. So that's if their two losses are Georgia and Miami. That's not bad, is it?
I would think they would get in. Yeah, especially if Georgia is in, that's a playoff team, and say Miami is a playoff team, and Clemson should be favored by a touchdown plus every game the rest of the year. I think Clemson's get again. We'll see if Miami
Yeah, Mario's a
doesn't.
wild card.
Yeah, they can. Cam Ward can be inconsistent. I mean, they are. They almost lost that game last week as 17-point favorites. Tough spot against Cal this week. Traveling out there, Cal coming off a bye should be healthier. Cal gets some key guys back, but Ole Miss they go. Their schedule. They host Georgia, and if they lose that game and they run the table, I think they're in. But if they go 9-3, they don't really have
Any good
any
wins?
other marquee wins. Their other games are LSU, South Carolina, Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Florida, and Mississippi State. So I don't think they get in at 9-3. They're one team. They just don't have the schedule. And then same with Missouri. I mean, Missouri, that like this is a tough game against Texas A&M, but then you have UMass, Auburn, Oklahoma, South Carolina, Mississippi State, Arkansas, and they do go to Alabama, but you're not getting in with that schedule at 9-3. But there are other things that could happen. You could have
Was the Big 12 getting one team in?
Big 12 should get one team, but say Iowa State runs the table, which I don't think will happen, but we still have to learn about that. But say they run the table, and then they go to the Big 12 championship and they lose to say Utah or whoever. Big 12 is wide open.
K-State.
Well, then that team gets an automatic auto bid, and they'll get a
Prime
bye
time.
the top 4 seed. But you probably still put Iowa State in. They were at 12-0. Big 12 schedule win at Iowa. So like a Big 12 could be a bit deep. So yeah, the ACC, if they get 2 in, if the Big 12 steals 2, if then you have your group of 5 team. That's 5 of the 12 spots. And the Big 10 is probably going to get 3 teams in. So
I think UNLV or Boise State is getting, if one of those two runs the table, let's face it, UNLV made the right move telling that kid to kick rocks because they look like they're good. They play Syracuse. If you listen to this on Friday tonight, that's a pretty interesting game, but it's in Vegas. Boise, that running back, I mean, he looks like, I'm telling you, to me, my comp, he's Darren Sproles at K-State. He is just dominant, and
he's the best running back in the country.
God, he's good. So one of those two teams, if they run the table, are you in agreement that they are the representative?
Yeah. The MAC is out of it now. You can cross them off. Like if say Northern Illinois ran the table, they would have gotten in.
Did they lose?
Yeah, they lost to NC State. They should have won, but they also lost at home to Buffalo. Bowling Green lost at home to Old Dominion. So every MAC team has a loss. They're done.
So Northern Illinois has lost twice since they beat Notre Dame.
Yes. So it's not a good look for Notre Dame. Conference. I don't think Liberty's getting in. Liberty had a game canceled against App State, and their schedule's a joke. And we saw them against Oregon get blasted last year. So I don't think they're in the mix.
I agree.
So they just don't have the schedule strength. The Sun Belt, Texas State was supposed to be up there too, but they've lost 2 games. They just lost at home to Sam Houston. James Madison is the one wild card. This is a team, they lost everything. All of a sudden, they're an offensive juggernaut. They scored 70 on North Carolina. That's a good data point. North Carolina's not great, but it's a Power 5 team. You beat them on the road 70-50. They put up 60, I think 60 again last week. This quarterback Barnett is going crazy. If JMU, they have an easy schedule. If they run the table, maybe. But if either Fresno or Boise runs the table from here on out, they're going to get in over JMU. But JMU, I think, is the interesting name to keep an eye on elsewhere. But yeah, the Boise and Fresno, Boise and UNLV will play.
Not Fresno after that.
Yeah, they'll play twice, most likely. Because they're gonna play
They play
in
in the regular
Vegas,
season. Yeah.
yeah, October 25th. And I mean the rest of Boise's schedule is pretty easy.
So
So
you'd
that
have to
game is
beat the other team
huge.
twice. Whoever wins that game has to win it again because if they split,
Yep.
they're.
But yeah, they're gonna be the front runners. They have good
Do
data
you
points
have to
too.
put a Power Four team in? Do they have to or no?
You mean a group of five?
Or yeah, excuse me.
Yeah,
The
yeah. The
non the
highest,
non-power 4 or 5 team, I guess the Pac-12 doesn't exist. The non-power five, do they automatically get a bid?
yeah, the highest ranked uh conference champion from
Non
the group of five level, the non-power four. Um, so
is
yeah,
guaranteed a spot.
guaranteed a spot. Which makes and they're probably gonna be the 12 seed, which makes the 5 seed, you get a pretty if you don't win your conference, getting that 5 is pretty big because you're gonna play
Like
a
a
group of five. But
Georgia, Oregon type team. That's a pretty
Oregon,
good spot. Yeah.
yeah, instead of the 6 seed, maybe
Though
you get
Boise
Clemson.
gave them hell. I mean, that could be a little NFL
Yeah,
rematch there.
look, I think it's the AAC. Maybe you get Army and Navy. There's a scenario. This is on our site if you want to go down the weeds on actionnetwork.com and the Action Network app, where Army and Navy are both undefeated, and then they play each other. Well, they play in the AAC championship. This is very unlikely, but Army and Navy both look good. Then they play again in the Army Navy game, but the College Football Playoff has to make their decision before it's a crazy scenario. Very unlikely. But yeah, the Mountain West is the clear favorite. I mean, maybe if Memphis or Tulane gets hot, but they already have losses, and the Mountain West has good data points. UNLV big wins already against Power Four teams. Boise with Genty, which gives them sex appeal, so to speak, but they went toe to toe with Oregon. Should have won, arguably, that game in Eugene. So yeah, I think they're the clear favorites, and Mountain West race will be very fun to watch.
Okay, Stuckey, let's keep this thing rolling. Let's have a good weekend and let's make some money.
Absolutely. See you next week, brother.